me for a second? Because
sure,
we are intrigued
Welcome.
to understand the hero's journey that you have gone through or are going through, so that everybody can find a little bit of relatability in what's going on.
sure. So I'm going to go through the one I'm going through right now. And a history of me, anybody who's ever heard me talk, I grew up as an introvert. I couldn't quite figure out how to talk to people. So what does every good introvert do? They pick up books, right? So if you saw my bookshelf over here, ton of books. Well, I've got the one you can see over here. My current reads are my favorites, but body language were the first ones. And so I have a whole bunch of those books. And I'd read books like How to Win Friends and Influence People. But it really wasn't until 2010 that I met my mentor who taught me how to decode people's facial features. And I started using that at work. And it's the skill that took me from help desk to regional vice president of sales. Now, with that being said, that skill helped me to meet what's now my ex-wife. I could talk to more people. I felt more sociable. And I kept getting promotion after promotion. But the downside was, while I had what looked like from the outside a great life, really I was kind of struggling on the inside. I was in an industry I no longer loved. I didn't like the direction the company was going in, but I kept getting promotions and I kept making more money. And I thought, well, I'll never be able to make this amount of money somewhere else. But what I do with my spare time is I ended up joining a variety of masterminds, classes, you name it. That's actually how I met Joe. I had seen another speaker at an event and he announced that he was creating something new. And I thought, man, I want to be like this guy. I want to be on stage one day and help people. And even back when I had met someone, I'd gone on a first date and she's like, what do you want to do with your life? I said, well, I want to travel the world and teach people something. But then the corporation got the handcuffs on me, right? I kept making more and more money. And I thought, oh, well, this is meant to be my path. And, like a lot of people my age, and I'm 48, I was raised by parents who are like, you get one job, you work for that company loyalty is important, but that's people who were raised where there was retirement, where that was true. You worked your 20 years and then you could retire and be taken care of the rest of your life. And I found myself at 21 and a half years being let go suddenly. And it was let go in such a crappy way that they let me go on the same day my benefits expired. So I couldn't even go to the doctor, get prescriptions refilled, you name it. And ironically, what should have been detrimental, I gave myself a day to be mad and a day to move on. And I went and I thought, okay, I can go get other jobs in the industry, even though I had a non-compete. I was going to work around those. But then I decided, no, for the first time in my life, I want to bet on me and do things that I enjoy doing. So I looked out and I sat down and said, okay, what do I enjoy doing? And it was always going to seminars and masterminds and learning. And because of people like Joe, I'd gotten exposure out there. So I'd been on podcasts, been asked to go speak. And I thought, that's it. That's what I want to do full time. And so now I sit in rooms that I used to pay to be in, but I'm paid to be there. And it hasn't been an easy road. It was where I had to go and cash out a 401k and go, am I willing to give this a shot or not? And after making a hefty salary, to start back at what I made 20 years ago is very humbling, because you start looking at things differently. Like, gosh, how much did I waste just because I was unhappy and I was buying things, right? So how much was I drinking? How much was I going out? How much was I trying to escape being near my laptop or near my phone? Because that 8 hours of pay paid a lot, but then I was miserable the rest of the day. And growing up, I remember thinking I had a dad who he worked for Montgomery Wards, and I can talk trash to them because they're not here anymore. And he came home miserable every day. And I thought, why are you so unhappy? And he said, oh, well, because I have 6 weeks of vacation and I make good money. And as a kid, I thought, oh, I'd never be that way. And yet at 47, that was me. I was at the exact same position I said I'd never be in, where I was so stressed out from work. I knew the things that were wrong, but I kept going, well, but I got a lot of vacation time and I make a lot of pay. And that decision got made for me. And when I say that, I could say, oh, this is what happened to me. And we all go through that victim mentality. But it really was. I'm at the first time in my life where every day is exciting. Now, with that being said, there's down days, there's bad times. I freaking missed my paycheck. But when you're working for your passion and you're not miserable every day, it's like suddenly being freed from your captor, and you no longer have what's it called, Stockholm syndrome, where you identify with who's holding you hostage. I look back now and I'm like, why did I not do this so long ago and on my own choice, my own volition? But it was made for me. And it was the best thing that ever happened. And, so where do you go when you're afraid to stand alone is you reach out to the people that you admire, people that you've already been following, and figure out, how do I model them? What do I do? I mentioned before, like Joe has been extremely, extremely important in helping me in this particular journey, because when you have a lot of friends that are 9-to-5ers, they just ask you, well, what's your next job going to be? And luckily enough, Ken Walls, I could say your name people, but the three that I'll name have really helped me the most were Joe, Steve Sims, and Brad Lee. So I actually met Joe through Brad. And it's those people who say things and just like, well, why are you doing this? Or why? Steve Sims, when I told him what I made in corporate America, I said, well, I'm really afraid to leave this and try this. He goes, how much do you make? I told him, and he laughed and he goes, that's it? That's what's holding you back? And it was a mental reframe, because when you're sitting around people that are used to a certain level, like I remember when I would go to any class on weekends or seminar, mastermind, I'd pay for it. The first question out of everyone was, oh, so work's paying for it? No, I want to go do this. Well, why? And now I sit in rooms where they're talking at levels, whereas I used to tell people I make, and they go, oh, wow. Now I sit in rooms, I go, oh, wow, okay. And that's really what it is the journey is you have to leave your starting point to get to the next level and start surrounding yourself with people. And I think a big mistake, because I was guilty of this, is I always looked up at the people who were so far up here that I admired. I thought, oh, I can never get there. But what I found is find people who are a few steps ahead of you and figure out, how can I get to their level? And then how can you get to their level? And when you're on a journey, it's not an overnight flight, right? It takes time to get there. It's like walking. It's like going Forrest Gump style, right? You're going to run across the US, not take a flight from coast to coast. Because the first thing I did that I freaked out was, well, how am I going to make the same money I did? But then I had to go back and say, well, what did I make the first year 20 years ago? And what's a bridge in between those? So if you are lucky enough to find something that you can immediately replace your happiness, your salary, or whatever it is that's important to you, then that's great. But it's not always going to be an overnight success. And it doesn't matter what industry you're looking at, who you're talking to. Last year, I had the luxury of being invited to the UFC headquarters and getting to meet a lot of the fighters. And we went to the induction ceremonies. And we see these people who are famous and making a lot of money fighting, but you hear their stories of how their coach took them in, they slept on the floor, and they didn't have money for a cell phone. But we don't hear enough of those stories. We just see people where they are, and we don't hear about the struggle they went through to be here today. And when you start researching the struggles of people, that's where you find, like, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one doing this. And really the big thing for me has been surround yourself with people who help lift you up and not help pull you down. And that was probably one of the best things that happened to me over, that little thing where we had to spend some time inside our house for a while, is it gave me a chance to re-examine, who am I spending my time with versus who I want to spend my time with. So no longer was it just a proximity thing. Oh, hey, it's my neighbor. It's somebody I've been friends with, but who do I want to spend time with? So when I go places now, instead of just saying, okay, I'm going to be a tourist and hop around, I think, is there somebody in that town that I want to spend time with? Is there somebody that I can go and learn from and reach out to them? And we live in an amazing day and age where you would be surprised how many people that you look up to answer their own DMs on social media. Now, if you send them an email, there's usually a gatekeeper there. But you'd be surprised at some of the people who answer their own social media messages. Why? Because they don't trust that to somebody else. It's a very commonplace to email, have a virtual assistant, have an assistant who kind of checks everything for you, has a gatekeeper on that. But for social media, some people have that level of trust, but you'd be surprised how many people answer their own. And so for me, it's one little thing. It's been building. When I first started speaking, it was speaking for free. And then it was, $250. I was making it in the world, right? And then it grows, and then it just continues to grow. But it requires consistency, just like general health. You can't go to the gym one day and be like, oh, I'm good for 3 months. No, you've got to continue to do things. Brushing your teeth. I know it's a simple example. You do it daily, and you don't think about why, because you want to keep your teeth long term. Now, I wish Joe did more bathing, but that's another thing I recommend doing daily.
I just typed in the private chat daily brushing your teeth. What?
There you go.
Wow.
But it really is about consistency on this. And that's, one foot in front of the other. And that's what sometimes we get so overwhelmed with is we look at the long-term goal. And am I where I want to be? No. But October, this month, will be the best month that I've had since starting this journey. And then there'll be where there's lulls and valleys. And that's what you have to really think about is depending on what your journey is, you should celebrate every success. So I have on my wall in my bedroom, I'm a huge fan of New Orleans, and they do second lines. And now they do second lines for weddings. They do them for birthdays. They do it just because people are in town. They do them for divorces. And it's the reason I have that photo when I wake up is what can I celebrate? What can I or should I celebrate today? Because we start getting into these negative ruts, and it's very easy when you start digging a hole to get stuck in there. But when you start having that gratitude for anything, I believe you attract more of it to yourself. And not even just what am I grateful for me? Celebrate your friend's successes at the exact same time. And you'll be amazed that what you put out into the world comes back to you twofold. Now, if it doesn't, who cares? Still celebrate your friends. But it is a side bonus that you get at the exact same time.
Wow, that's awesome, man.
Wow.
That's absolutely awesome. Well, you know what's interesting is we're watching both of these speakers come back over, and it's the hero's journey. Mm-hmm. So who's ever watching this, they need to resonate with James, obviously a big extrovert, and he's out there. He had his courage moment in his struggles, and he came out and 62 million views last month or whatever it was. So some people are going to go, oh, okay, well, he's really out there. But now Brian's sitting here and you are a self-proclaimed introvert that you want to stay yourself. So there's the people right there are listening to go, yeah, I'm not out there. I can't take the journey. Well, hell yeah, you can, because Brian took it, and it was also following the faith. Mm-hmm. And you were hitting the steps. And if people listening, the reason that we have this whole thing is because you can see the steps on this hero's journey. We're early on in these steps, but if you go back and listen to Brian and James going through, you'll see the steps on it. You'll be able to recognize absolutely every single one of those on their hero's journey. And Brian, thanks. It's an amazing story. Follow the dream. Surround yourself with good people. Find your mentors, except for Joe, who doesn't bathe. But all these other ones are going to be, they're hitting the points, and this is exactly what I want people to hear and be inspired to do is, watch this, people. This is real stuff, people. So thanks. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I did leave out one step, and that is I hired Steve as my coach later on. First, I watched him, and I thought, man, this guy does what I want to do. So there's a lot of people who will offer to sell you something that they don't do. My advice is if you're looking for a mentor or someone, make sure they actually do what it is that you want to do, because that can make it or break it for you. Because people who are doing it can introduce you to people who can help you do what you want to do. If somebody's selling you a course, not so much.
Totally, 100%. That was awesome.
Yeah, I think that was interesting too, Brian, kind of what you had talked about, all those things that you had done, those seminars prior to those things. Like if I was writing a movie, that's what you would do, right? You allowed those things to drip on you, right? Mm-hmm. And it just sunk in until you got the biggest obstacle thrust upon you. All of a sudden, hey, you're out of that job. But every step that you took prior to that was building and building and building so that you knew what that next step was. You just had to take that leap of faith to try to do it. And I had mentioned to Joe earlier in there that, who's had a bigger glow up than Brian? And, I remember, where times where you were kind of, slowly moving into that spotlight and didn't feel comfortable in it. And now I see video after video of you And I'm like, dude, this dude owns it now. Look at this. Like he's one of them. You know, he is that influencer. He is that teacher. All of those things that's in there. So I think that there are steps that people can take. They may not be ready to take that big jump, right? That's in there and change their ordinary world like you did. But that you can take those little things, and then when you do meet those mentors, when you do have those people available, then you know, okay, this is the next step. Now I can trust it and I can go from there. So congratulations to everything you've done. It's been beautiful to watch, honestly.
Look at you, inspiring people, didn't even know it.
Didn't even know it, sir. Didn't even know it. All right, guys. So, well, thank you, Brian. Thank you, James. So for those of you that want to learn more about our guest speakers on there, please go to heroesjourneylive.com. In there, you'll see the bios for everybody in there. You'll see links from One Life production as well. Join us next week. Join us for the after party. So for those of you on Zoom in there, join us for the after party to discuss a little bit more about this episode, or share your own hero's journey. And join us next week for our next episode, The Guardian of the Gate. Appreciate you guys. Have a great day.